governance, and by that I don't mean to get into the details of what data governance is and why everybody's looking at it, why we need to do it. Just like what we are trying to do here is to impart some of our learnings and some of what we've gone through with data governance so far. We are going to frame what we mean by data governance so that it's, we'll have a synced up notion of what we are trying to do here. And then I'll go through essentially what we think is a more practical approach, because as you can see, things with data governance can be a little bit scary. Okay. So the first question I think everyone would ask, and by the presence of the numerous people on this call, it seems like data governance is something we should be doing. But I think it's kind of encouraging to see some of the research on data governance, in particular in the financial services arena. About a year or so back, Eagle Investment Systems, that they are a subsidiary of Bank of New York Mellon, but they also provide a lot of financial related technologies, and Waters Technology, who's active in the financial services, some research, and what they found was that all the financial services organizations globally, you can see a very small minority of global financial services firms that they have a mature data governance strategy. And then you can see that what I underline is that everyone agrees or understands that data should be treated as an asset and want to do data governance, but it really is, at the end of the day, pretty nascent, the work that various firms have done. And again, given that a majority of the crowd here on this call is credit unions, including ourselves, we are just in the beginning of this journey. So if you're in the beginning of any journey, the first thing you might want to do is to go look around to see if you can find something you can read about data governance. And quite frankly, if you've done a Google search, or in this case an Amazon search for books, you see that there's a plethora of books and information on data governance. Actually, the hit on Amazon when you type data governance was something around 3,000 different books. Of course, they're not all strictly related to data governance. The fact is that data governance, because it creates a lot of interesting opportunities, as you will see, then once you have data governance, you can do other things like master data management and so on and so forth. The bottom line is that if you're starting out like we were about a year and a half ago, before I got here, you see that there's a lot of information, and to top it off, analysts and vendors alike are peddling all sorts of data governance solutions and analytics. So it can be pretty confusing and hairy, and that's one of the reasons we thought we'd have this call because we've gone through a lot of it. Actually, I've only been here shortly. The team here, Naveen and his team, have been at it for quite some time. And the reason we started this, and everybody wants to start this, is actually pretty simple. We all know that with the advent of digital technologies, lots of interesting possibilities are being created around data that is becoming increasingly abundant and, of course, valuable. And that's the key. It's really the value of the data that is now being gathered by enterprises of all kinds. And what that value really translates into is three typical benefits that every company is looking for. increase revenue, reduce costs, and operational efficiency. And specifically, if you think about what data governance can bring to the table, a lot of it, quite frankly, has to do with analytics. Part of the reason we've sort of connected this whole analytics and data governance theme together. Because with the more powerful analytics, being able to access data across a company and correlate that data, you can do better selling. You can do better pricing optimization. In fact, for banks and for us, one of the areas that we are attacking with data governance is better credit analytics. You can, of course, do better marketing, targeted marketing, provide better customer service. And as far as reduced costs, again, for financial institutions, it's the all-consuming compliance and risk management, which can be done better if you had better data, better access to data, and also consistency of data. I'm sure everyone has a good story to tell about how they're even, as far as credit unions go, sometimes you find that the number of members that you report is different than what your systems tell you. So, that, those are some of the areas that you can reduce costs with better data governance. And finally, operational efficiency. The single source of truth is the holy grail that everyone is looking for. It is kind of difficult if you are anything like First Tech. You have, dozens upon dozens. In our case, maybe about 50 sources of data. And a lot of times the data is duplicate, and the idea of creating a master data repository for being a single source of truth is something that can only be had with proper data governance methodology. So let's look at how the industry defines data governance. It's really quite simple. It's about the overall management of the availability, usability, integrity, and security of data that's employed in your enterprise. Interestingly enough, this is how one describe the management of any asset, which is why we go back to saying that data in data governance needs to be treated and looked at as an asset, just like a financial asset, or even hard assets. If you think about hard assets, they have a governance. We don't call it governance, but there's policies, procedures, processes that are involved with to ensure the availability, usability, integrity, and security of your computers, your hard assets. So that's really the approach that one needs to take when looking at data governance in general.
Sure. There's a question here on the chat. Why did First Tech invest in data governance?
Actually, let me back up for a second. Like I said, I'm fairly new, and the data governance initiative has been going on far longer than I've been here. So I think that Naveen, who started data governance at First Tech, might be in a better position to go back to the history of why First Tech started data governance. Naveen?
Sure. So this about 2 years back when we started on this journey, one of the first things that we were actually trying to do is to create a sales funnel. So here we got that. Here we were using it to get data from CRM, from marketing automation, from our core banking, and we were trying to create a sales funnel. And we were looking at that sales funnel. We were working with different business functions, and we were trying to agree on the terms like lead and terms like opportunity. And we realized that each business function has different meaning for the same terms. That was the key for us to start investing in this data governance program. We realized that either we go down this path where we have to question the data each and every time someone is looking at a report to understand what each of the data elements mean, or we invest in a more structured way of resolving these definitions from the set-go. Another thing which dawned on us is that as we were starting on this journey, one of the first questions which was coming up, okay, how much data are we talking about over here? And we realized that actually we don't really have a list of data sources. Each business function typically has a very good handle on the different data sources that they have within their domain, with what they understand. But at an enterprise-wide, we did not know what all the data sources are, who are the data owners of those sources, and maybe even the term data owner, what does it really mean? We then went into discussing the security and the risk associated with the data, meaning who should have access to it, who should not have access, and what does the risk that is implied with the certain access. We looked at the business glossary, and that is when we realized that, okay, you know what, this is a time for us to invest into a formal structure like a data governance program. In absence of a program like this, we may be grappling with these issues on a day-to-day basis, which may slow down our ability to use this very important asset that we have. And the reason why we really went down this path of investing in data governance.
Great. Okay, thank you, Naveen. Sushita, what are the processes, just to remind everyone how they can ask questions? Obviously, somebody asked a question over chat. Can they, is that an open line? Can you explain this?
So we have started the chat over the window. So if they have any questions, they can just send those questions in the chat window. Okay. And we'll look into.
Okay, great.
So, or if they think they have questions, but they're not able to ask them because of the timing, they can send us questions to Shahram, you or me, or put it on the LinkedIn. We can go over those questions also.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you for that question. So as Naveen, this was actually a great lead into sort of the next phase of the presentation, which is what have we done? And Naveen just explained why we got into data governance. And I explained it's a very overloaded amount of information is just quite literally mind-boggling. So what we're going to present here next is to talk about how we've distilled or what we've distilled of all the information there is, and how we are approaching the data governance initiative. Keep in mind that if you pick up pretty much any book, whether it's from a vendor or an Amazon or the Data Governance Institute, there are lots of frameworks and very formal ways of defining the steps of data governance. What we found is that data governance and the approach can and should differ based on how big a company is, how much data you have, and quite frankly, what is your end objective? So this, we believe, is typical of, would be typical, our approach of a mid-sized, small to mid-sized financial institution. There's, of course, always, you can refer back to the books that provide the much more level of detail, or in our case, we would be happy to share with you if you feel that the level of detail that we provide here is not enough or you want to learn more. We are happy to share the next level of detail because we do really believe that data governance is important, and it's not important just for us, but for the entire credit union industry. So we're happy to help spread the word. So let's talk about our approach. At the highest level, we have a very simple view of how we should approach this. The systematic parts to implementing data governance. In other words, there are ways that you have to define the people, the processes, and the policies that that describe how data should be accessed and used in an enterprise. So essentially, it's a number of what we call internally artifacts that need to be created that describe all the rules of engagement, if you will. Another definition I liked, which was a little bit simpler to see, is data governance is really about getting people to do the right thing with the data that they touch. But there is a systematic approach to that. However, based given what Naveen said and what we all know, there's a lot of data. There's a lot of sources. There are a lot of businesses that need different pieces of that data. So you can't boil the ocean. That's one of the things we found with data governance, and everybody who's done it will tell you they can't just get in and say, we're going to bring data governance across all of our enterprise all in one shot. A very important piece here is to prioritize and figure out which data sets or which businesses can benefit most from governance and attack those first. Now, even another angle to this phased approach is that data governance, as you will see, has many different dimensions. Dimensions will mean data governance has to do with security and access policies, has to do with quality policies, it has to do with the availability policies. But depending on the kind of data that you've chosen in your phased approach, you may want to focus on, for example, quality, because the quality in itself can be a pretty hairy thing, but in fact, for financial institutions and credit unions, a big part of the policies has to do with data access, security, and compliance policies. So in the phased approach, you not only want to look at what data sets are going to be target of data governance, but what areas of policy and standards you want to focus on to govern that set of data. I mentioned the systematic part has a number of artifacts, and this is essentially the list of artifacts. One of the things we found is that a lot of literature that you read, they talk about frameworks and methodologies, and this is what you could do, or you know, all the various options. We're running here based on all of our research and all of our work, the sum total of what we need from a systematic perspective bring to bear to institute data governance. And again, don't forget, this is not data governance across the entire enterprise. It's a phased approach that will hopefully lead to data governance. But during every phase, these are, and for lack of a better word, these are really documents. So there is a mission and charter that we've created. We have that. If anybody wanted to look at our version of mission charter, we'd be happy to show how we did it. There are a number of core principles. What are core principles? Principles are sort of foundational. The term principle is almost self-explanatory. They don't talk about specific policies of how to deal with certain kinds of data, but they talk about the principle, a principled approach to how you want to institute data governance. You know, things like integrity, compliance. They don't talk about what needs to be compliant to what, but they talk about how any data governance rules or policies or guidelines that you create need to be compliant with regulations, with internal enterprise rules and policies, and so on and so forth. And by the way, the first two, the mission and charter and core principles, are enterprise-wide. They're not. Hopefully, they will be the same, and I will show you. You know, how in the phased approach, in the workflow, they are your guiding light, so to speak, in every phase. The mission and charter talks about not what data governance is today or what you're going to do tomorrow or the next 6 months. It talks about the end state. It talks about once data governance is there across the entire enterprise, what will things look like? This is particularly important because it sets the vision. And as we all know, because you will see in the phased approach, there are a lot of gates to go through and a lot of people that are involved. So it's important that we get everyone, everyone wrapped around a single vision so that we don't get distracted as we implement the new phases. And same with the core principles. Core principles are almost like, if you think about it, the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, they rarely change. They are what everything that you build, every new policy, rule, regulation that you build needs to have the core principles in mind. There's the business dictionary or glossary that we talked about. This is one of those things that's important for everyone to have the same vocabulary when they talk about data. As Naveen mentioned, simple things like a data owner. We found that people didn't know what data owner means. Therefore, if you go ask or tell somebody that you're the data owner, they will argue with it, and they'll have their own definition. So having a business dictionary and glossary about data, subject to governance, that the entire enterprise uses, allows everyone to speak the same language, if you will. And finally, what we call a federated set of policies, standards, process definitions, roles and responsibilities specifications, and I'll get a little bit into those things. But again, those are nothing but documents that to guide how data is accessed, how it's used, how it's manipulated, how it's eliminated or gotten rid of in the enterprise. Dimensions that I talked about, the dimensions have to do with security and access, with the quality of the data, with the availability of the data, and also with how would you report an audit? How do you measure if, for example, you're meeting quality standards? To audit, go back and figure out whether access policies were violated, and what do you do about it? These are all documents, artifacts. Again, you'll hear us use that term very commonly. Describe basically the overall usage rules of any data that's under the data governance umbrella, if you will.
I think that.
Oh, sure.
So, if you can elaborate more on federated policy.
Oh, what does federated mean? Okay, great question. So federated, you know, I talked about the Bill of Rights, the core principles of Bill of Rights. This sounded a little corny when I read about it, but a lot of people talk about it this way. Is that the extension to the Bill of Rights is how we govern. There are states, there's federal laws, and laws are federated across multiple states. What it means is that, and it becomes important, when you have a phased approach, you're hacking a certain set of data. When you're creating a policy around how to access that certain set of data, you want to create not just a policy that involves that particular set of data that you're accessing today, but you want to make sure that your policy can be extended later when you have new or different sets of data. Now, in practice, that may not be possible because you're writing certain policies and standards, and you may not have visibility to all the nuances of other data that is not under governance today. But the idea is that when you go to another phase and you have new set of data, you need to go back to the policies that you created around data access and, as needed, update the federated set of policies. Number one, sure that you haven't violated, if you will, any of the policies that already existed. But at the same time, just like with states, you have a bunch of federal laws. You have some local set of policies that are applicable to the larger enterprise, if you will. So you have to account for that. You have to think about that you have a set of policies that apply across entire data set, enterprise data, and if you have some localized data that's very specific to a business or perhaps to a region, for credit unions that may not be as applicable. For a global institution that may be more applicable because access policies may differ across different countries. So the whole idea of federated is that you need to understand and take into account that there are umbrella policies that should cover all data, and then possibly local policies that cover specific sets of data in specific circumstances.
And I think this goes very closely to what we have understood from our business functions. For example, the data that is originated in consumer lending or data that is originated in retail branches, the data owners for basically the business leaders of those businesses are the ones who are really responsible for defining the data access. They are the ones who are accountable for the data quality and for the data availability. So that is what we mean, that there is enterprise-wide broad policies, but there may be exceptions. There may be exceptions on a function based on specific reasons. So say, for example, if someone is really looking to get access to the consumer lending data that is coming from the consumer lending group, then they need to make sure that they are following those appropriate policies that the business owner for consumer lending has defined.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
I think there's one more question too.
Yes.
Because you have a single glossary for the entire company.
That's a great question. So the idea is that you want to end up with a single glossary, with a set of definitions for data that's consistent across the board. But as we said, because you're taking a phased approach, the way, at least we are doing it, we're building the glossary as we go on. So certain terms that we know are universal across the board. Then when we get into each phase, there are terms that may arise that are specific to the data set that we're working on. But we are not attempting to get that's actually a very good question, because unlike the mission charter and core principles, which we believe should not change or change very little, the business glossary, even though it's enterprise-wide, it's only practical to build it as you go. That helps the person who asked the question. All right. So we talked about our approach is systematic, but I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail because the phase really this gets into the implementation. Once you implementation of or creation of all those systematic artifacts that we talked about, and there's a lot of minutia involved here, as you imagine, to any kind of implementation. Suffice it to say that a couple of things that are important here is that this goes back to the principles that I mentioned, is that it's very critical that those principles be sound and have been reviewed and overviewed and approved, so to speak, by the Data Governance Council that I'm going to talk about in a second. because no matter what sort of workflow, and the workflow can depend, the reason I said a typical implementation workflow is because it depends on what the scope is in your phase, in the phase that you've chosen. If you recall, you need to not only choose what data sets, but you also want to choose what areas you might want to focus on. So the workflow will differ greatly, but at the high level, so these are the steps you would take in implementing whatever scope you've chosen. So you see the start here, it says you define a finite scope. And the next part or next step to this phase immediately after or in conjunction with defining a finite scope is aligned with the business value. So one of the key critical points in data governance, key to success, is alignment with business value. There are, you will read a lot of literature that talks about the biggest mistake that people can make is to think that data governance is an IT function or it's a program, some kind of a programmatic function. No, data governance is all about adding value to the business, as was in the earlier steps. It's all about increasing revenue, reducing costs, and improving operational efficiency. So it's all about business value. And any step you take in implementing data governance needs to be aligned with the value that it's bringing to the business. And the other steps are really your typical steps in rolling out any kind of initiative. You implement, you roll out, you have to have a management structure in place. And last but not least is evaluate. You have a phased approach. That means this gives you a great way to, before you go to your next phase, to evaluate how you did with the first phase. This is not unlike an agile sort of methodology, which I would assume that most, if not all of you, are familiar with. But a very critical step, because if you don't evaluate and see what went wrong, what right, did we achieve what we wanted to achieve, then if you skip that step and then go to the next phase, you might be repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Those are at the high level, sort of the framework for how to, the approach, really the methodology, systematic and phase. But we've, any initiative you take on has people involved in it. They are the most important part of the success of any initiative. So it's critical that we share with you that we believe the roles and responsibilities, or the groupings of the roles and responsibilities of various people involved in the implementation and rollout of data governance initiative at First Sector. So obviously we have the program office. You can think of the program office is myself, people who look at what's the best way to approach data governance, and what we need for implementation, who are the people that we need, how do we bring them all together. It's sort of about administering, if you will, data governance across the enterprise. I have the all-important the Governance Council. The things that I wanted to hit on is another one of the critical success factors, kind of extension to business value being a critical success factor, is executive sponsorship, if you will. And executive sponsorship means that you don't want to just get a nod from the heads of business or the CEO that, oh yeah, this is a great thing to do. There's no doubt that they're going to tell you it's a great thing to do. but you need to get them involved. So the governance council is all about create a council of the top business executives, business owners across the company who can help prioritize, approve, empower, and enforce. What we mean by prioritize is what data sets do we choose next? What's important? What business has this need or can benefit most from data governance? Then the whole set of artifacts that we talked about, if they're not approved, if you just create those documents and you just put them on the web or put them in some internal community or somewhere, but there is not a stamp of approval at the highest level, then they're not going to get used, they're not going to get looked at. Now, once you put those policies and standards and definitions together, then you also have to empower your people to be able to use those. What empowerment means is really tools. Give them the tools that they need, give them the encouragement that they need in order to implement and comply with the governance policies. And then, of course, there's the enforcement, and that enforcement is a wide open area. What we found is that you don't want to go in with a lot of enforcement. And just to be clear, by enforcement, what we mean is what do you do when people don't comply to certain access standards? Well, with access and a bank, that might have regulatory implications, so you might want to enforce that a little bit more strictly. But data quality, we all know data quality issues exist. We have lived with them for dozens and dozens of years. Once you bring data governance in place, that does not mean that your data quality is going to improve suddenly. Actually, what it does mean is that your data quality issues are going to be surfaced more readily. And then it's up to you, it's up to the council to decide what they want to do. Do they want to fix data quality issues right away? I can tell you from a practical perspective, at SEC, that's not possible. A lot of data sources are legacy data sources, and they have issues, and going back and fixing those is as practical as one might think. But the point being that the council is the one that decides how and when to enforce policies. Then there is data handlers. They are really the people that on a day-to-day work with it. They touch it in some way or another. And then we've categorized those to data owners. These are the people from the business, on the business side, that have ownership for the data. They've bought systems that collect certain data, and they are held accountable for the protection and the quality and the availability of that data. Then there's data stewards. That's a term that you will hear much more commonly in a data governance environment, because data governance is really all about allowing other businesses to share data that is consistent with rules and regulations, that is of high quality, and so on and so forth. So that means that a lot of the data gets out of the hands of data owners and goes, in our case, we've created a data warehouse that collects all of that data. So data stewards become very important in this, is because they are the ones that ensure that from governance and from data owners are applied correctly, and that the data is manipulated and accessed in the correct way. So there are actually books written about what data stewards' job is. And the data specialists are typically the technical people, that are your database administrators that actually do the work. While data stewards sort of oversee and compliance, specialists are the ones that use the tools to create audits, for example, or to make corrections, to make corrections to the data quality. They are typically, as I said, database administrators or analysts. And then the consumer is the end user, the one end user, not, typically end user in our context would be all the business users within the credit union. They're the ones that benefit from all the data that now has been available for their use. So another big player here is IT. IT is really the steward of all the tools. They help implement, integrate. They do a lot of upkeep work. So it's very critical that they be at in the center of the work that we do with data governance. And last but not least, the risk compliance and InfoSec, because anything that you do around data governance needs to be consistent with company and regulatory risk and compliance policies. Finally, just a quick peek, I won't get into this, is that all the people, the roles and responsibilities that I showed is shown in an operational model. This is how our people connect with one another, all these people that I talked about, and what their top level responsibilities are, and what the input and output, if you will, to each role is. And last but not least, I know I want to leave some more time for questions and discussions if they come up. But just to sum it up, what are, at a high level, what have been our learnings? Think big, start small, move fast. So that's kind of a cliche, but it's very true, especially in this project. But from a more tangible perspective, what I found, and I said this earlier, executive sponsorship is critical. One of the research papers that I just presented some of the findings also mentioned that 80% data governance initiatives failed because they didn't have executive sponsorship. We see that as a given here, and we work very hard to not just get the initial phase of the executives, total executives saying, yes, this is what we should do, but they need to be involved in every step of the way. What we also realized is that bringing data governance is a great way to promote cross-business alignment. As I said, one of the benefits of data governance is it makes implementation of more advanced analytics possible. More advanced analytics means that analytics want more data. Data that perhaps is not available from one business, is available from multiple businesses. So data governance makes those needs visible, opportunities visible across the business. Another sort of a practical thing that we found is that there is a lot, as you can see, there are a lot of people involved, a lot of documents and processes and definitions and back and forth and approvals and all of that. And when we started out, we didn't really have a well thought through collaboration tool. We found that implementing a dedicated collaboration tool will increase participation. If you are like us, you probably use SharePoint or something similar. We didn't find that to be as good as something that's a little bit more conducive to collaboration and work. The term I'm looking for is a community. That's kind of a term you may have heard. It's a community platform. So it's not just about sharing the documents, but it makes providing comments to documents and ideas and all that, managing those a lot easier if you had a collaboration or community platform. And finally, balance bureaucracy. As you can see, data governance, and as it's intuitive, governance, the term governance just implies bureaucracy. Lots of paperwork, lots of policies, lots of auditing and all that. But you have to approach this with a little bit more balanced view. And remember that up to now, we've all lived without data governance. So if you keep that in mind as you are bringing data governance to the forefront of the company, is that it's not the end of the world if certain things are not done exactly the way that's dictated by the policy. So, and that helps adoption by people. And so that's really...
So Shahram, we have one more question here. It says, do you have a staff fully dedicated to data governance? Or data governance is just one of many responsibilities of our staff?
That's a good question. I'll answer from my perspective, and Naveen, since he's championing data governance within First Tech, can answer that. There is no dedicated staff. I mean, I would say the only dedicated staff would be, the closest one would be me. That's the whole point of data governance. Data governance is about getting people show across the organization to collaborate. So the most one I need is someone who can organize and coordinate and herd the cats, as the word goes. But we don't, at least so far, Naveen, I don't see any need for a dedicated staff.
I agree with you. I think I see it that given our size, first thing is credit unions by nature are small, and given our size and given the complexities that we face with our data, they are much smaller compared to the rest of the world, right? We are not like a 50,000-70,000 organization like Cisco or EMC, or where there is tons of data sources. There is global organizations, people are sitting in multiple time zones, and there are a lot of bureaucracy and all those things, right? Those are the places which require a more dedicated data governance program office. But for our size organizations, it is a part-time function. It is a function which is basically a responsibility of many other responsibilities. That is one thing. Second thing is that when we went through this whole process, as Shahram, you pointed out, there is so much of information, so much of books, there is so much stuff available out there on the net. It is very hard to put together a data governance office for smaller organizations like our size. And what we have done at First Tech is they basically distilled down those concepts, those values into a framework which we see is a repeatable framework that be used by organizations, credit unions of up to like 1,000, 1,500 people, right? And that is the value. Second, another thing that I see is that as we are creating these or working on especially the business glossary, and there are other aspects as well, there are opportunities to collaborate with other credit unions. And I see that actually Joe Horton from Washington State Employees Credit Union is in the participation list here. A few weeks back, we were having this conversation with Joe where he was talking about how he's reverse engineering and creating a business glossary for Accelerant, which is one of the loan origination and the collection applications. A good number of credit unions use it. We need to see how we can join hands, collaborate on such efforts, such that we can do it once and we can all benefit from it. It's like reinventing the wheel.
Oh, we didn't have any inconveniences, but thank you. We had
Look,
to run
somebody's
over
off mute.
before.
Okay, user 20.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shahram, for providing
There's a couple other questions.
Oh, there are.
okay.
Yeah.
So one question is, where does data governance fit in first stack or sit in first stack?
Naveen, because like I said, he's the champion.
I think first thing is that data governance is an enterprise function. It's not a function or a program office cannot be successful by itself. It is not a matter of just putting together some documents and policies and all those things. There is a need to bring the organization together. There is a need to have different business functions together. Just to give you an example, that when we have the steering council meetings, we have the business leaders from quite some majority of the business functions at Stack available to look at and review the artifacts, look at the artifacts, approve them, and discuss them, and things like that. So the program office by itself, right between business and IT, which is with the data team, which is with my team, but at the same time, we interact with all the business functions in the organizations, including IT on one side, as well as all the business functions on the other side. We see us as more of a facilitator, where we're trying to bring the businesses together. We're trying to create a framework for discussion, but at the end of the day, it is up to the business, because they are the one who are really defining those policies, are benefiting from it, and all those things. And they are the ones who really find value in it.
And Naveen, we have one more question here. It says, how do you compete data governance tasks against high priority revenue generating projects, especially in terms of allocating personnel?
So I think, again, there are two ways to deal with it. One is that either we put the data governance task on the sideline and try to resolve those questions which are governance, answer them in a more structured way, in a more ad hoc basis. So say, for example, we have those discussions around definition of leads or opportunities, or definition of members, and so on. Either we grapple with those type of questions each and every time someone sees a report, or when they do reports and they see the numbers are not matching. So we spend our time there, or we do it in a more systematic manner. What we did is that we will take a more of a hybrid approach. We will have a systematic as well as phased approach. We don't want to boil the ocean. We want to create a very big bureaucratic process. At the same time, we want to focus on the areas where we can benefit the most. And it is, again, remember, it is not about that if you are investing in data governance, you are not investing in other projects, but you basically in data governance an integral part of those projects. So say, for example, if you have a project around a specific analysis, maybe you use that initiative as a way to define those business terms and bring people together as part of that project, such that at the end of the project, not only that your project is ready, but also those business terms are very well defined and understood within the organization.
That's right. And just to add to that, in the spirit of this whole spirit of credit union collaboration and cooperation, we're hoping that some of the work that we have done, if we were to share it in more detail with other credit unions, which I believe Naveen has said he's open to it, that actually accelerates some of the work, so that some of the other credit unions don't, may not have to do a lot of this upfront work that we have done. So that could actually sort of alleviate some of the costs, that perceived costs that might be associated with doing data governance.
So I think the follow-on question is a question that what community platform did you adopt for collaboration?
Oh, that's a great question. So currently we're in the process. We were using Confluence, but we found that a true community platform is even better. So we are looking at the option of using either Jive or Lithium right now, because they give you one more level on Confluence, which is still, we said we start with SharePoint, then we won't move to Confluence, and now we've outgrown that, and we're going to a more formal.
Next level.
Yeah.
And I think maybe a related question here is that their audience over here who are interested in collaborating with us and with other credit unions, that we can enrich this whole data governance.
Yeah.
Not only just data governance, but maybe let's start with data governance.
Yeah, actually that would be a good point, because as we move to Jive, we could actually make our collaboration platform sort of open to other credit unions potentially that might be interested in this. I mean, that's kind of a sort of an open question to everyone on the call. If you're interested, certainly let us know, and we'd love to get in touch with you and see how we can make this happen.
Sure. Yeah, we are almost there for the
Okay.
time. So thanks everybody for joining the call. We'll be sharing this recording and the presentation Shahram has showed to you over the LinkedIn, and I'll be sending to you also.
Great.
Thank you so much, and see you for the next webinar next month.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.